What is your best my friend is dating a terrible person and nobody can get through to them story. They got together and she immediately took over his house, which she began referring to as her house. He would come home and find out that she had her father over and they two would actually remodel portions of the house without even letting him know. Dude was a commercial artist, so he had a small office studio in one of the unused bedrooms. While he was at work, her and her dad took everything out of his office studio, moved it to the basement and then moved the washer and dryer to that room. Then, apparently, realized that there were no ducts for the dryer and they needed some 220 outlets installed, so she called him at work that his house sucked and he needed to get an electrician over there ASAP to fix this. Which he did, paying the emergency rate. Was hoping he'd see the light. Unfortunately he did, but only after 2 kids and her forcing him to quit his good job with benefits. My fiance's best friend, let's call her Nicole, dated a guy a few years back. Let's call him Chad. Chad had a problem with drinking and drugs and would come home loaded and beat her on a regular basis. Nicole had a problem with depression and drugs, although always working to better herself, and believed that love conquers all, and Chad was a great person inside and that nobody saw the good in him that she saw. Nicole had a supportive family and stuck behind her through thick and thin, but Chad would always just enable her to use again. Nicole showed up to family dinners with bruises to which Nicole would say were accidents and Chad didn't mean to. Her family urged her to leave him and call the police, as the police wouldn't listen to her mother because she wasn't the victim. Nicole finally got on the right track and filed a domestic violence case against Chad. A restraining order was put in place and Nicole was back getting the help she needed and putting her life back together with the support of her family. The police told her to keep a log of any time Chad tried to contact her or see her or harass her. This turned out to be an everyday event of her logging his attempts without her responding to him once. After about 3 months of this, Chad began threatening her. Nicole reported every incident to the police and they would go to Chad and he would deny everything. Even with her daily logs she kept, the police said they were doing everything they could and recommended her blocking him, if she hadn't already, on all modes of communication and just ignoring him until he lost steam and got it through his head and went away. Chad showed up freaked up one night at Nicole's new apartment. She had moved 3 times in the past 6 months, and killed her. His defense was that he was freaked up on drugs and needed help, so the court did not give him a life sentence. Since this incident, my fiance and Nicole's family have worked for years and finally last year got a law put into effect that requires repeat offenders of domestic violence to wear a 24-hour GPS monitoring anklet that would work with an app to alert the victim if the offender came within a certain distance and automatically send the police if less than 1,000 yards away. It doesn't bring Nicole back, but we can only hope it helps prevent another family having to go through what Nicole's family had gone through. The guy loved bragging about what a dong he was, treated her like crap and never seemed interested in her, until he found out how rich she was. Then, he publicly declared they're together. After 3 years of toying with her, at every family event he was at, he just treated it like one big networking bonanza. Doesn't seem to have a clear job, but claims he's in finance. Claimed to be working remotely while freeloading at her parents' place for 6 weeks, and happily treating all their household staff like they were his employees. We all tried telling her, and even though we're like sisters, she actually told me, it's okay if you don't like him, you don't have to. Her father reminded her that it's in their family constitution that any potential spouse must be thoroughly vetted by private investigators first. He gave her the courtesy of warning her that he was going to do it in exchange for her agreement that she won't tell him while the investigation is ongoing. She confidently agreed, completely believing he'd come clean. Yeah, the butthole was cheating on her. She was a mess for the longest time, but fortunately, she's fine now and married to the most awesome guy ever. We were 17. He met her at a Walmart. This girl was a hypocrite if there ever was one. Holier than thou and judgmental, but also trying to get knocked up at 16 by anyone she could proposition, including his friends. And my brother, she was also a control freak, jealous. We begged and begged him to get far, far away from her. Who wants their friend to be a teen dad and tied to a loony forever? The best we could get from him was that he promised not to get her pregnant. Yeah, no. She was pregnant within a year and they got married. Had 2 more kids but finally broke up a few years ago. We're 28 now and the kicker is he still won't divorce her. She lives with another guy and had that guy's baby, but my friend just won't file the papers. And she won't either because of a bull's law that requires him to pay for a baby that isn't his, because they're married and the law says it is even if genetics say otherwise. It's both sad and frustrating. Oh, I had one of those friends back in high school. She and this other kid started dating all lovey-dovey for a while, but after a bit she completely shut down to all of us. It was like something inside of her died. She started saying how she wanted out of the relationship and how she couldn't stand him anymore, but for some reason she just never broke up with him. He got worse and worse with her over time, started hitting her and threatening her. Eventually her parents and the police got involved and they broke up for like a month or two, but then they just got back together. From then on she weirdly seemed to bounce back and forth between being super in love with him and happy that they're together, to looking all dead inside and seeming unable to stand him, and it just went on like that. He'd go too far. They'd break up for a bit and then get back together again over and over. We all tried to talk some sense into her, but she'd get angry at everyone, telling us it's none of our business and we should stay out of her life. I think her best friend got so frustrated with her over that she completely cut her out because she couldn't talk sense into her or help her, but she also couldn't stand to watch it go on. We lost touch pretty quick after high school, so I don't really know how she ended up. I want to believe everything turned out alright, but it's so easy to see a scenario where she ended up marrying that guy out of high school and spent the rest of her life miserable and trapped with him. I knew a girl in this situation in high school. She was a couple years older than me, so I lost track of her after high school. Maybe 10 years after graduation, I saw her cousin, who was soon going to the girl's wedding. I asked who she was marrying, not Mike, which was really all we cared about. Apparently the husband's a nice guy who has some of his own experience with abusive relationships. When I was in high school, my best friend started dating a fellow that was known to be a pose, but she was in love and we couldn't convince her that it was a bad idea. He started beating her almost immediately, but that didn't deter her at all. He would take her car and pick up other girls, but they were just friends. She got him a cell phone in her name and ran up enormous bills that she couldn't pay. He gave her herpes, and we were like, okay, maybe now she will leave him. Nope. He was street racing in her car and smashed it up and she forgave him, even though she couldn't afford to get it fixed. He took all her money. We begged and pleaded with her to leave him and she said she would, but then secretly kept seeing him. Then one night we went to a community dance and he started strangling her in front of everyone. It took 3 huge guys to get him off her and the police were called. He ended up leaving her after that and she was devastated. The hold he had over her was crazy. And what was even more crazy were the girls that got together with him after all this happened, knowing fully well what he was like. My sister-in-law has always had weight issues, thanks to her parents who always called her little fatty growing up. At 21 she went rummaging through humanity's garbage can and brought home the first piece of crap to show her any attention. Within 9 months of meeting him they were married and within a year she had his baby. This guy has it all. He's openly rude to her and her family in public, and in front of her parents. He has about a 5th grade education and 0 plans to improve himself. He has a baby with another woman who he never sees, and never tries to. He has a drinking and gambling problem. He also makes sure it's a his money or her money situation, and gives all his money to his parents, who are better off, his nieces, and on booze gambling. So my sil, who does now make a lot, basically supports them. He insists on living in the shittiest, most dangerous part of town, even though they've dealt with several break-ins and they could live closer to her parents for less than they pay now. Speaking of them, they're basically raising his baby because she works and he just stays out as much as possible. I figured they wouldn't last a year, but now I fear she'll never leave him and the kid is going to turn out super fricked up. I watched my best friend's wife, thankfully now ex, systematically dismantle him. It was horrible to watch. I was vocal about how much it bothered me and it drove a wedge between us, and some years passed where we didn't speak to each other. We have since reconnected and she is out of the picture. It was hard hearing him say, dude, you were the only one who told me it was a bad idea and I pushed you away, but I'm glad he saw the light. Dang, that's tough. Good on you for being open to reconnecting, and on him for seeing his mistakes. Hardest thing in the world to admit you were wrong, especially with something so profound as marriage. He cheated on her multiple times. He was emotionally and physically abusive and he slowly turned her into an insecure, crazy bee. She once slapped me because we were in a club and he said something to me and I responded, but because it was loud I had to talk in his ear and she thought I kissed him. She moved countries for him, allowed him to live rent-free while doing nothing. Meanwhile she was working 2 jobs to support them. He'd break crap in the house whenever they got in a fight. He brought girls back to her place and fricked them in her bed and sent her pictures while she's at work. They got pregnant and she got an abortion, but he didn't go with her or support her emotionally or financially. After the abortion, when they fight, he'd tell her she was a murderer and killed his baby. They're still together. 10-year week. In this case the friend was me. My ex-wife would invite a couple of her friends over once a week for dinner. Whatever else she was an excellent cook. She was also sleeping with at least 3 other guys and carrying on an online affair. I suspect her one friend knew about it and tried to tell me about it over dinner on more than one occasion. She explained that she had a friend who was getting married, but her fiance didn't know that she was cheating on him all the time with a bunch of different guys. And I would say, well, why don't you tell him? And she would go, it's complicated. I know him well enough, but she's been my friend for years and I don't want to alienate that friendship. It was a recurring topic of conversation at weekly dinner. We were divorced by the time I realized she was talking about me. Girl I knew got knocked up by this dude who had a knack for catching assault charges and getting sent to jail and or prison. Despite his violent behavior, even toward family members, though not as violent as his full-fledged assaults, she was adamant about marrying him. Apparently, he wanted her to drop out of college and be a stay-at-home mom that he supported. 2 things there. First, good luck doing that as a felon in this economy. Not impossible, but unlikely. Second, maybe I'm jaded, but to an outsider, that seems like obvious economic manipulation that this guy wanted her to depend on him so he could keep cheating on her and whatnot. After he got released from his latest stint, he cheated on her again and she finally wised up and dumped him, but she still constantly posts conflicting stuff on social media about how she loves him but also hates him. Dude was clearly bad news from the beginning. She seems to be doing fine as a single mom with family support, but pretty much everybody could see the writing on the wall except for her. Date is probably not the right 4-letter word to use here, but I had a friend who was head over heels for a guy that was basically just using her as a toy for years. She'd maintain his house, take care of his pets and basically bend over backwards for him for anything, both figuratively and literally, because she thought it would make him love her eventually. Thing is, it was not mutual. He didn't like her like that, only saw her as a friend, which he openly admitted to both us and her, but she didn't get it, was in denial. He would also constantly berate her right in front of us. He was very quick to anger and would often try to intimidate, threaten people that were disagreeing with him. He wasn't stupid though. He would never make actual threats of violence, just raise his voice a bit, move closer to you to skirt that line. He was a very fit guy, so it often worked. Anyway, this went on for years, which amazed me the most because I've never seen a friends with benefits relationship go that long. Usually someone eventually says frick this and moves on by then, but nope, she did not. He kept dating other girls, which would emotionally destroy her, but she'd stick around and keep taking care of his stuff for him. Then the guy and his GF would break up, so they'd go back to their FWB situation, which she was seemingly content with since it meant they got to be together in some capacity. Then he'd find another girl to date and they'd back to square one. To this day it is the most bizarre, semi-abusive relationship I've ever seen. I haven't spoke with her in a while, so I kind wonder if they're still doing this. The whole thing feels like a really slow ticking time bomb ready to go off, but it just won't. Soon after getting together, she moved into his apartment. She turned his spare bedroom office into her music room. Next, she turned his garage into her yoga studio. She never did yoga. She preferred his car but wouldn't let him drive hers, meaning there were many nights where he was stuck at home while she was out with her friends. She controlled his drinking. The few times he was out, he was allowed 1 drink, which she usually drank, while she got totally rat-faced. She often stayed over at other guy friends' houses cause it's too late to drive home. She planned an elaborate holiday trip, which he paid for, to visit her ex. Relationship lasted a little under a year before she broke up with him, because he turned 36 and she only dates guys who are 35. Dang, she swiped him like a no-limit platinum credit card. That thing must have been good or something. Jesus, this is a horrible story. F for that year of our man's time and money. Buddy of mine started dating an actor and was absolutely smitten with her. There's nothing wrong with that profession, but he was just kind of at a different place in life than her, and we all knew there was no way it was going to work out. He can party, but she was absolutely wild. We all tried to gently point this out to him, but he wouldn't hear any of it and got upset with us for trying to sabotage his happy relationship. As things moved forward, she started having angry outbursts and literally just running away almost every time we'd hang out. Still, he persisted with the relationship. Eventually, she was ousted from her apartment for not paying rent, and to all of our dismay, my friend invited her to move in with him. I've never facepalmed so hard in my life, but he's an adult and can make his own decisions. It ended several weeks later when he came home to find she had thrown all of his clothes and belongings out the window onto the sidewalk in a tantrum and was trying to kick him out of his own apartment. He finally saw the light. Funny side note, a week before he met her, my girlfriend at the time and I were out drinking and she commented on how she'd always kind of wanted to go to a strip club. So we made the drunk decision to call a limo and go. It turned out to be the club my friend's ex worked at on a night she was a regular. Tried to kick him out of his own apartment. What a ballsy trash bag. My sister-in-law dated this high school dropout hophead townie forever. In fairness, they started dating in middle school and were on again off again for years. No one, even her parents, could understand what she saw in this guy who had no background, no ambition, and no discernible good qualities. He was just the local neighbor kid who started creeping on my sister-in-law when they were young and would never go away. She just kept telling us we don't see what she sees in him. I roll. Eventually we just accepted that nothing we said was going to change her mind, and after a decade or so we got to know him and realized that he absolutely loved her with his whole heart and would do anything for her. He was actually really handy with a strong work ethic. He's great with kids, and will be a great dad. Turns out, he realized early on that he loved her and it's actually a boy meets girl hometown romance. She saw all this in him the whole time and we never really looked past the surface. They finally got married a few weeks ago and I couldn't be happier to call him my brother-in-law. That was very noise. We had one friend in our group who was this introverted but sweet guy. He hooked up with a girl we called the troll. I don't quite know what he saw in her. Maybe he was just lonely, but she was unattractive, unpleasant, unintelligent, and most importantly, she was terribly domineering. Like she was telling him off and telling him what to in public. I dread to think what it would be like in private. She was also cutting him off from his friends, especially female ones. They're married with twins now. Holy crap, this terrified me. Everything here is my best friend's relationship except she hits him in public too. He's since stopped talking to us in favor of her, and we ended up just letting his parents know what's up before leaving. He now aids her on social media insulting us. My best friend and I met through our boyfriends. One weekend we went on a girls trip, just the two of us, to my parents' holiday house. Our plans were to go hiking and chill out on our own. However, he called her 2 days in and started verbally abusing her for no reason and was yelling that he was going to drive the 300 km and pick her up. She calmed him down and I drove her home so that she could break up with him. She didn't. You've been visited by the toothpaste man. For good teeth and fresh breath, comment oh fresh. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.